Tonight, President Trump holed up at the White House as the partial government shutdown drags on with no deal in sight. The stalemate hinging on Trump's $5 billion demand for his signature campaign promise, a southern border wall. One he repeatedly said Mexico would pay for. The president, who just days ago said he'd be proud to shut down the government over border security.
I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.
Today, in a tweet, signaled it could last a while. With Democrats dug in,
I have never supported a border wall.
Mr. Trump summoned top aides and allies to the White House Saturday afternoon to talk strategy. The president later appeared to soften his stance in a tweet suggesting that he might accept funding for a steel barrier instead of one made of concrete. A senior administration official tonight tells NBC the president is willing to negotiate on the type of barrier so long as Democrats agree to one as part of any deal. Tonight, nearly a dozen departments and agencies have run out of funding, roughly 25% of the federal government gone dark. That means 380,000 government employees are furloughed or forced to take unpaid leave until the shutdown ends. Another 420,000 deemed essential employees are expected to work without pay. That includes TSA agents who are on the job during one of the year's busiest travel weekends ahead of the holidays. They'll be paid retroactively once the government reopens. I'm Jeff Bennett at the White House.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.